Hey everybody, welcome to Wine Time. Amber, I hope you had a great week.
Great week.
So we had a lot of people sign up for the magnets and to enter to win that cool backpack tote thingy?
Actually, we have, Dave. So as
Awesome.
a friendly reminder, if you haven't already, to go to our website and register for the magnet. And with that, you are automatically into the sweepstakes to win this awesome wine tote backpack, which is very cool. So just as a friendly reminder, one per person. And as soon as we get that, then the magnet will be sent on your way. You have until October 6th, and on October 7th, we're going to be announcing winners. But you don't want to wait for that. You want to get your magnet soon, so go ahead and register as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, the backpack, that is awesome. I've said before, wine is heavy, and any help carrying it, a backpack would be awesome. So,
That's
hey,
right.
do you like sparkling wine, Amber?
I do. I like the bubbles.
Awesome. Good deal. You know, a lot of people think of it as, there's for special occasions or as an aperitif. You know, you walk into an event, they hand you a champagne to cleanse your palate or whatever. So we're going to talk about sparkling wine today, champagne and a couple of others. And hopefully we'll get people to realize that it's not just for celebrations and
That's
it's
right.
not just for, aperitifs. It's good anytime. Even breakfast. So let us know in the comments. Let us know if you are think that they're best for breakfast, or if you've ever had them for breakfast, or if you think they're good for other times besides breakfast as well.
Or for
So
all of them, right?
all of the times, yes, it's good for
Right.
all of the times. So
So, Dave, today, our wines are sometimes sealed with different closures that don't need a corkscrew, don't require one of those. But there are some that still have that cork, and we have to be very careful because if not, we will have pieces of cork into our wine and it can present some difficulties. So, what's the best way to get a cork out of the bottle?
So there's a lot of different ways to do it. You know, the hardest thing about this is that we wait so long and I have to smell this beautiful wine before we get started drinking it. But I brought actually some examples of some ways to open a
Great.
bottle of wine. And I'm going to actually move these for just a second because we're going to have a demonstration. So
Right.
anyway, the first kind of corkscrew, the one that I recommend to most folks, and you have to learn to use it. It's not the easiest thing, but it's probably the most versatile, and it's portable. You can take it everywhere, but pretty much an airplane, because it does have a little knife thing on it that will help you cut the foil off of the top of the bottle if you need to. So
TSA would
be
not like
careful.
that.
No, they're not fans of that at all. So other than that, once you get the foil off, you have access to the cork. You put it in, you screw it down, and then it's just a lever basically. So you pull up, and the cork comes out. You put this on the edge of the bottle, pull up, the cork comes out. Simple, real easy. Once you get the hang of it, it's real easy. So the other one, the one I recommend for people if they have some trouble with it, and it's great for home use. And a lot of people don't like to mess with that, or a lot of times they'll have, like, if folks have arthritis, that doesn't mean you have to stop drinking wine because you can't get the cork out, right?
Right.
So this is one that I call like a bunny ear type. You
Oh,
kind of see the gist there. It kind of looks like that, but it looks really complicated, but it's actually one of the simplest ways to get a wine cork out of the bottle. I have a bottle that I just recorked, so you kind of can have it's empty. I drank
okay.
it already. So all you do is it's got this the handle on top. You flip that forward so that pulls the worm, they call it, up out of the
Okay.
way. You clamp it on, you push the button through, you pull it out. You now have access to your wine. So your cork is
Easy.
out. To get the cork off of there, you just put it back through, squeeze it again, cork comes out. You're ready to open the next bottle. So again, it looks complicated, it looks crazy, but it's actually a very effective way of getting the cork out.
Very nice.
So another one is called the asso, which is a little fancier method. Usually only wine snobs will have these. So
Okay.
of course I have one. But basically, imagine the cork is still in the bottle. It's got these two prongs on them. You just kind of ease them down the side. This works best for a cork that you think might be damaged or might be old, like you're opening an old bottle of wine, and you just kind of twist it back and forth, and the cork will come out. So it's pretty effective, but it's not the easy. I actually pushed the cork down into the bottle using one of these before, and that's no fun. So probably my other favorite kind is actually kind of I guess maybe a gimmick. I don't know. Maybe it's a flashback to the days of my pellet gun when I was a kid. But it's got a CO2 cartridge in it. It's
Okay.
got a needle. So you basically you push the needle through. You give it a shot with the CO2 on the top. It pops the cork right out. So it works about 90% of the time. You know, if the cork is a little tight, sometimes you try to put a little too much in there, and then it really flies, and it can get a little explodey. It'll just pop right out. So anyway, so those are my favorite ways to open. I have some not so favorite ways that I'll share, and I think you actually use both of these or have
I
access to
do.
both of these to
I'm the
use. So
novice, remember?
no, it's not that. I just have reasons, and I have access to others, so I don't use these anymore. But the kind with the wings, I think you've got that one there. You know, I always end up with one wing up and one down, and the gears strip, and it just confuses me. So anyway, so yeah, so that one, the wing one, a lot of people love them. Nothing wrong with them, just not my choice. And then the other one is the electric corkscrew. A lot of people love those. I've had one or two of those in the past. My biggest issue with those, they do work great. My biggest issue is I've had times when I went to use them and the batteries were dead and I couldn't get to my wine. So
Totally
that is the
understand
problem.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
This,
that is
this
the problem.
this one is just like a toy because it lights up. So this is
Right,
actually
even better, right?
so yeah. So,
Definitely.
so Dave, you know what? Sometimes people are intimidated by sparkling wine because they do have the cork and they have that metal cage and the pressure and everything can be unnerving. Is it possible for you to demonstrate for us tonight on how to properly open a bottle of sparkling wine? Because earlier I did not, and it did. It exploded. It was explodey. So
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to use that word a lot, I think, the rest
yes.
of the day. Exploding. So, and I borrowed that word. It's from a winemaker named Kieran Robinson. I've heard him use it one time about a wine he made. So, but yeah, so we're going to take a bottle, a champagne bottle, the one we're going to try later in the show, because this one's not open yet, and I'll show you how. So there's usually a foil over the top. There's usually a tab that'll show you where to pull, and that'll come off. I just took that all off because I struggle with that more than anything else, opening a bottle of sparkling wine. And so it's got a little wire part here. You untwist that. I think it's 6 turns. There's a standard number of turns actually that go into
Okay.
these things. So yeah, looks like about 6. So then you just kind of spread it apart. I'm not sure how much of this you can see on camera. Try to do as close as I can. But you notice I'm keeping my thumb or my finger on top of all times because you really don't want to like NASCAR it up and spray bubbles out everywhere because it does 2 things. A, if you get any on your friends, they'll not be happy. B, it's wasting wine, obviously. And C, the wine that still is in the bottle will go flat a lot faster. So we want our champagne or sparkling wine to be bubbly and go from there. So now we've got the cage untwisted. I usually take the cage off, but I'll still hold the sides of the cork just in case, right? And then I'm going to keep my thumb on top of it. So now you can take a towel. I did not grab one, but I was going to and put it over it. And if it gets away from you, then it'll deflect the cork down instead of shooting your the people across the table from you in the forehead, or you'll shoot your eye out. Right? So what you do then is you take it, you kind of have it here with your thumb on it, and you're holding the cork kind of like this and holding it tightly, and you have the bottle in your other hand. And what you're going to do is just rotate it back and forth. And you're not looking for a lot of people hear the pop, they're like, oh, celebration. Well, that's going to cause, again, the same thing. So you want it nice and easy, and you don't want it to make a lot of noise. You just want a slight hiss. And I've heard it described as you want it to sound like a fart in church. So,
oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
so
far
I'm not sure what that means or who came up with that. I'm just quoting a friend. So, but anyway, so we're going to just twist it back and forth and hold it in so that it comes out slowly. And I don't know if you'll be able to hear this. Just a nice little.
Oh, so nice and easy. And I heard the hiss. Yep. Mine, unfortunately, just went all over the place. So look at that.
There you go.
That's why you're the wine time guy.
All right. So now we've got that bottle open. We've covered that. So our first wine tonight, and I'm pretty excited. I was really worried that I was going to screw that up and it was going to knock the lights out in the basement or something like that. So anyway, we're going to do a cava, which is from northern Spain.
Oh, very nice.
It can't be. It's made in the same method as champagne, the traditional method, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But it can't be called champagne because it's not from Champagne. It's not even from France. So as we talk about how it's made, and I'm going to go ahead and slide these back over here a little bit just to kind of get everybody in front so they can see them. But the traditional method started in France. And so we're going to kind of bounce back and forth. Even though we're talking about a Spanish wine, we're going to bounce back and forth to the French method that kind of inspires all of this. So,
so Dave, who figured all this out? I mean, if we're in Spain, but it can't be called champagne because if it's in France. So.
Yeah. So the French figured it out. It's kind of funny. We talked a little bit about fermentation and how that works, and you have to get it completely dry, otherwise fermentation will start, or you have to kill the yeast. Well, back in the early 1300s or whenever it was when this was coming about, they would ferment their wines, and if they didn't get it fermented all the way dry before it cooled down enough that fermentation stopped, yeast would go to sleep, and they would be, oh, it's cool, it's just going to rest all winter. Well, in the spring, it starts to warm up. Well, the little yeasties wake up from their long winter's nap, and they start eating the sugar that might be left if it's not completely dry. That creates alcohol, like we've talked about before, and also carbon dioxide. And so the carbon dioxide builds up. Well, all of a sudden in your basement, you go down to check on it, and there's a mess because one of those bottles got a little too much CO2 in it, and it blew up. Then it hit the bottle next to it or hit the other one, and they went off like fireworks. So, it's a mess, and it really caught. But that's how it got started. Somebody figured out that after that busted up that, hey, this wine has a lift. It has some sparkly stuff going on in it, some bubble. And then we should figure this out. So they figured this method out, which we'll talk about right now. And it's been refined, obviously, to the level that it's at today. That's kind of how it came about. The grapes are picked for champagne less ripe than they are for a regular wine. They make a still wine out of them. They go ahead and pick them, and it's a low alcohol, high acidity wine. It's called base wine. So they blend several vintages together because most sparkling wines are a non-vintage wine. They don't have a designated vintage. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the France version. So they'll bottle it. Then to that bottle, they will add a little bit of that base wine mixed with some specific champagne yeast and some sugar. And then they'll seal it with the crown cap. And I'm going to grab this bottle again here. So if you look, I don't know if you can tell on this, but if you look, the top of a sparkling wine bottle is typically going to have a different style lip on it. It's going to actually look like a beer bottle almost, right?
Yeah.
And that's because they put a crown cap on to seal these at this part in the process because they're going to need to open it again. So a crown cap is basically a cap like on a beer bottle. So it holds the pressure, it seals it up, and it does what it needs to do. So then they put them in there. That process starts again. The champagne yeast start to eat the sugars that they put in there. They ferment it all dry again pretty much. And then that builds pressure. So the carbon dioxide is in there. The yeast, the lees, which is the dead yeast cells, are in there. And then those kind of all meld together for a little while. And you want to try to eventually get all those little yeast particles into the neck of the bottle. So they're in a rack or they're in something that's got them at an angle. So you're trying to gently get them all to move to the neck of the bottle. And the reason you're doing that is you will get all of them down there, and then they will freeze those, right? They'll put the neck of the bottle into a freezing solution and freeze those solid. They'll take them into a kind of a covered space. They'll pop that cap off. That yeast, because it's under pressure, and like a champagne bottle is literally going to be under pressure about 3 times what your car tire is. So you think about how a car tire can pop. That's more 3 times that pressure is in a bottle of champagne. So they'll pop that cap, and just like you would a beer bottle, that it'll basically eject those frozen yeast cells out of the end of the bottle. And they'll refill the bottle with what little wine came out with it, with some more of that base wine. And put the cork in, put the steel cage back on, or put the cage on it. They'll flip it, shake it a couple of times, flip it around so that new base wine mixes with the fermented wines.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And that's how you have champagne. So that's kind of the base of it. So We're going to try a cava. It's one of my favorite sparkling wines. I think it's a fantastic value. There's some unbelievable cavas out there for unbelievable prices right now. And I happen to like it a lot. So crisp
Okay.
and clean. You might get some apricot. You might get some pear. Again, just a fantastic wine. We're going to do the 6 S's for most of these. You might be wondering why I have my wine in a regular glass and not a champagne flute. You got the flutes. You got the
I got
flutes.
the flute. Yep.
So flutes were developed for one reason, not because they're better to drink champagne out of. It's because they're pretty. So, you know,
I
they're
think
taller.
they're pretty.
Yeah, they're more elongated. You see the bubbles going up. Where mine, the bubbles don't last as long in these as they do in a flute, but you get better aromatics. So I honestly couldn't find my flutes today. I was going to have some, but I'm not sure where they're at. I just drank my sparkling wine out of a regular wine glass. So, so we'll do the 6 S's. We're going to see it. Just get a little different color. It's kind of cool if you look all 3 of them, but a little different colors across the way. But we're going to swirl it, which you really don't have to do because it's kind of swirling itself. But I always do out of habit more than anything else. Sniff it. Oh, yeah. So you get a little bit of that bread dough kind of, you know, yeast kind of smell with this one even. And then we're going to sip it, swish it, and savor it and see what happens.
Sounds great. I like it. Oh,
yeah.
And it has a really nice little even aftertaste, but it just kind of hits your tongue and kind of tingles a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I love sparkling wines. So I love most wines. I shouldn't say that.
That's right. You do. Well, I was going to say so far 1 for 1, but then again, I always like number 1, right? So
I always say you can't like them all if you don't like the first one, Amber. So nice job. So
that's right. So Dave, we've talked about over the last few weeks about careers and about how to become a winemaker. We talked about universities that offer degrees. We talked about how to use your wine knowledge if you are in the food and beverage industry to enhance your career. But are there any other cool careers out there that we might be interested in?
yeah, well, there is a unique opportunity, I think, especially for people who live in Missouri. A lot of people don't realize that most of the wine barrels that are made, that are used in the wine industry and even in the distilling industry for bourbons and whiskeys and whatever else people barrel age, a lot of those barrels, especially if it's American oak, are made right here in Missouri.
Here in Missouri?
Here in Missouri, our very own backyard. We have a lot of trees in central Missouri, a lot of oak trees, and they've developed a pretty good business of making barrels there. And then the person who makes a barrel is called a cooper, as it says there on the screen, and the place where it's made is called a cooperage. So, and making a barrel is as much of an art as it is a science. You have to get the right stave to put together. And if you've ever noticed, most people don't even think about it, but if you look at a wine barrel, it's not like a cylinder that's straight up and down. It's got a bow to it, so those all have to be bent to the appropriate curvature. And then a lot of people also don't realize is that if you have a barrel where you're aging something, most times you're going to char it on the inside or toast it, and that's going to, open up those pores a bit so that they interact with the wine or with the whiskey, whatever you have in there, appropriately. And if you like a wine barrels, they talk about the levels of toast that you have for more interaction or less. In a whiskey or a bourbon barrel, a lot of times they'll talk about the char, because those are much more char, because they are much more dependent for their flavor on how the liquid interacts with that barrel. Wine, you want some of it, you don't want too much of it. You also don't want just raw oak, because that's too much of just that. So it's a balance. You can order different levels of char. I think there's like 6 different levels or something like that you can order for wine barrels, and just as many for other types of barrels as well. So, but yeah, so it takes a long time to learn to do that. It used to be a 7-year apprenticeship to learn how to make barrels. Now it's about 2 years of training. The modern technology has shortened a lot of this period, that time period.
But that's still a time investment for sure.
It is, definitely. And because of that, probably, and just other things, a lot of cooperages are having a hard time filling cooper positions. And so hey, if you like to work with your hands and you're not afraid of hard work, because barrels are heavy, that's the other thing. They're
Right.
not light. And guess what? It's hot because you're working in a factory basically with fire where they're charring the insides of
Right.
barrels and stuff. So it's not an easy career, but if you're interested, hey, I'd look them up.
Oh, right.
They're always looking for people. So, and if you don't want to work in that industry, you should at least take a tour of the cooperage.
That
I think they're down. Most of them are down around Lebanon, Missouri. So it's not a far drive, especially from St.
no.
Louis. So, but
So as soon as this is we're allowed and things are open again, that would be a great little field trip.
absolutely, absolutely. So, hey, have you ever been to Italy, Amber? I know we talk a lot of times about your travels.
We have actually, Dave. My dad is retired military, retired Air Force, and actually we were stationed there at Aviano when I was a very little kid, and so have some good memories there. But then as an adult, I've also been able to go back and visit again. So it definitely has a little special place in my heart.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, our next wine is from Italy, so that's exciting. We're going to talk about Prosecco, which is from usually around the Veneto area in Italy and northeast section of Italy. And it's made from the Glera grape, which actually used to be called the Prosecco grape, and then they changed the name because they wanted to be able to designate it anyway. So other people can make Glera, but they can't make Prosecco. Prosecco, again, like champagne, Prosecco can only come from Prosecco. So
that's right. They have their own little trademark too, I guess, right?
Exactly. Everybody's got to have their thing, right? So
right.
the thing that makes it different than like cava or something that's made in the traditional method is it's made in the Charmat method, which is a little bit different style. Same process. You're still getting that secondary fermentation. Where haven't you been, Amber? That is a good question. So, but anyway, it's the same process. It's just not put into bottle for that secondary fermentation. It's done in a large vat. That helps. You don't get as much of the autolysis, which is that melding of the yeast cells and CO2 into the wine with the Prosecco as you do. So not as much of that bready, yeasty flavor as you get more fruit flavor with Prosecco. It takes place in a large vat instead of in the individual bottles, or a large fermenter of some kind that's sealed up and pressurized as the CO2 builds from the secondary fermentation. So, like I said, preserves the fruitiness of the wine. It's also cheaper to make, so a lot of producers will do it that way. And Prosecco is not the only sparkling wine that's made in the Charmat method. So. It just happens to be one. So a lot of Proseccos are slightly sweet and fizzy, and they have larger bubbles to me. I equate like Prosecco bubbles are more like almost like a Sprite. Tends to have a little larger bubbles as opposed to the small fine bubbles. So anyway, but typically because of the style, they don't pair as well with food as a lot of other sparklers do. And they don't age as long as sparklers made in the traditional method do. So, but it does make a fantastic mimosa. If you've got some juice, don't just stick with orange juice. Try pear juice. A pear Prosecco is a lot of fun. You could do peach and make it a Bellini, basically, that type of thing. So, but yeah, let's give this Prosecco a try.
Sounds great.
So you can tell on the nose, it's a lot more pear and maybe some apricot kind of stuff going on there, as opposed to we had some of that in the cava, but it's way more pronounced in the nose on this one. So
that's pretty tasty.
Yep. I will admit I'm not as big a Prosecco fan as I am like cava per se, but that's a pretty nice one. I do like that one a lot.
Yeah, that's a great one, actually. Okay, I'm not sure yet, so I'm not sure which one's my favorite. We still got one more to go. So
we haven't tasted the big boy yet either, so we got to get to that one later. So
that's right. So Dave, as we've seen on the news, these terrible fires that have been taking place in California and our other Western states, how are these having an effect on the wineries?
It is terrible, and it's awful to watch from afar, especially. But most of the wineries have survived kind of this round. they we've kind of found over the past few years that as they've had fires, really, I mean, they have a lot of fires, but it's like 17, 18, 19, and 20 now. We've had significant fires in wine country, especially out there. And they are affected by those fires in some respects, but they found a lot of times that a vineyard is actually a pretty good fire break if they're
Oh,
maintained properly.
okay.
If they're not overgrown or that type of thing, if they're trimmed properly, you might lose some equipment, some irrigation, equipment or whatever, but it doesn't mean they aren't damaged, and it doesn't mean that there's not an issue because and this year is a little bit different because in the past so 17, 18, and 19, those fires happened in October, and 90 to 95% of harvest was complete at the time.
Okay.
I do know people who were affected by them and didn't get to complete their harvest, but this year the fire started in August, and it started from a thunderstorm as opposed to the Santa Ana winds, which have caused them to pass. So that kind of sets this year apart, and it's kind of changing things. And this is definitely a question we'll get in depth with, probably with Bart Hansen, about in 2 weeks when he joins us for our final episode this season. He's the winemaker and owner at Dane Cellars.
Looking
So
forward to
definitely,
that.
yeah, definitely mark your calendars for that. But we'll definitely talk with him a little bit about that and how these are affecting even his business. He buys his grapes. He doesn't own any vineyards, but it still
Oh,
affects how he makes his wine and the decisions he
sure.
makes. I'm hearing of some wineries now that are they're just not going to make red wines this year because red wines tend to be more affected because, as we've talked over the past few weeks, the red wines have to sit on those skins during fermentation. That's where a lot of those chemical or the compounds that
Mhm.
cause the smoke taint taste that they're trying to avoid stays on the skins, obviously, because that's exposed to the smoke. So the smoke is almost more damaging than the fires in a lot of cases. So, but and that similar folks might make more rosés this year because they spend
Mm,
less time on the skins, and you
mhm.
might not even smell them on the grapes, smell the smoke on the grapes when you put it in. But sometimes fermentation can kind of activate some of those compounds, and we all think, oh, we love a good smoky Cabernet or Merlot or whatever, but it's a different kind of thing, and that smokiness comes from the earth. It comes from just the way things develop. And you get like a smooth campfire kind of fireplacey smell or whatever, or toasted marshmallow over a campfire, nose or flavor to it. Where a lot of times with these wildfire smokes, you'll get kind of like a used ashtray that has
Oh,
been in a couple of months, and it's terrible. You really don't want to. Don't They're undrinkable. So,
yeah.
last week we talked about how a bottle of wine is kind of a snapshot in time of everything that happened leading up to the point that it went into that bottle. And during the growing season, when the planting was done, even. But these fires are an example of how a single event can wreck years of preparation and planning and implementation, and it can be
Yeah.
very detrimental to somebody's livelihood, actually, because they can't produce the wines that they planned
Devastating.
on and invested in. So. Uh, there's one winemaker that I will share her story. She's a multi-generational family of has owned this wine. This family has owned this wine for multi-generations, and she said that they may not have any good wines this year, but she was going to make at least she said, if I have to make a barrel of smoke tainted wine that no one wants to drink, I'm going to make it because we've never missed a vintage,
Good for
and
her.
it's not going to happen on my watch. So she's going to persevere, and at least if nothing else, it'll be a bottle to set on the mantle and remember this year by that they made it through and they still accomplished their goal of making wine. And so I admire her for that perseverance.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Well, she has amazing perseverance. And like you said, I mean, Mother Nature has been not so kind these past few years to the wineries for sure. And as you shared, the climate and the environment truly does have an impact on harvest and production and livelihood. So, but I commend her for at least making that bottle, even if it is in commemoration of the year. So
right.
that's
But
something to celebrate. And
yeah,
I think,
I think they'll have a celebration for that
yeah,
eventually. Yeah.
for sure. So we should as well. And I know our next bottle of wine is champagne. So tell us more.
Great. Yeah. So like I said, this is made in the um, in the traditional method because it started in France. And so again, has to be made in the Champagne region to be called Champagne. Again, there are other regions that make sparkling wine, like a Cremant from other places in France, but it can't be called Champagne. I recommend if you see a good Cremant from Burgundy, they're going to be less money. They're also made with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which is what Champagne is made from, along with Pinot Meunier. So Champagne just pairs with everything. It's just really good with that, with any kind of food. It's great if you're having a dinner and people are having fish and people are having, hamburgers or whatever. Just get a bottle of bubbles.
Why
Just
not?
go with it. It's
Why
fine.
not?
Yeah. So Champagne is mostly blended wine most of the time. It's going to be the Pinot Noir grape, the Pinot Meunier grape, which we've never really talked about, but it's just kind of a smaller part, and then Chardonnay. A lot of people don't realize that, but Champagne is a kind of a special place to grow wine. It's really far north. I think it's the farthest north region, typically in France, where you'll find grapes grown for wine production, and that's because they don't have to get as ripe. Remember, we talked about in the traditional method, they pick early before they're completely ripe, so they're low alcohol, high acidic, or low sugar, high acidic wines that come from that. So they're not completely ripe, like a green grape, pretty much. They also grow on slopes, so they get good sun exposure because it's so cold there. They need that sun exposure, and then also they grow in these chalky white soils that they hold moisture, yet they drain well, which is kind of weird, but it's perfect to grow grapes in for this type of thing. Plus, the fields are almost white, and so they reflect the sunlight back up to the grapes when it is out, and so it helps them to get to the ripeness that they need to be. Again, a lot of champagnes you may not realize, but you won't find a vintage on a lot of champagnes. They blend for a house style. They buy grapes and they put their blend together so that they taste the same, typically from year to year. So it'll be designated as a non-vintage champagne. Yep, and in certain special years where everything comes together right, and they don't have over here in California, we worry about fires and that type of thing. In Champagne, they worry about frost and hail and things like that because of the way their season hits. So those are all things that they have to worry about. But when everything comes together and it makes a fantastic wine, they will designate a vintage. So if you buy a higher end Champagne, they a lot of times will have a designated vintage, but you won't see one from every year because they aren't like that. So
interesting.
So other than vintage or not having a vintage, some things you might see on the label of a bottle of Champagne. This is a Grand Cru Champagne, which is just a special designation for quality from the governing body. You might see a Champagne labeled Blanc de Blanc, which means white of white. So you'll know that is a white Chardonnay made from or a white Champagne made from the Chardonnay grape. If you see Blanc Noir, NOIR, and that's white of black, and that means that it's made from the Pinot Noir grape, which is considered a black grape. So they will make some of those occasionally as well. Grand Cru, like I said, special designation. It'll be a little more expensive typically. The other fun thing that you'll find that not a lot of people know, and you can impress your friends with this, but on almost every label of Champagne, not any other sparkling wine, but from Champagne, you'll see there's a number. It's going to be in the smallest font possible, but it'll start with like an NM, the letters NM, and then a bunch of numbers, or an RM. And so the NM means it's the negociant style. It means that's a champagne house that's buying grapes and putting together a wine to meet their kind of style. If you see an RM, that's what we call a grower champagne. And that means that estate grew 95% of the grapes that went into that wine. So that is we've talked a lot about in the past about, wines that are of a place and a time. And that a grower champagne is more of a sense of place because you get that. So anyway, that's a lot of info about Champagne.
Great information.
So, just as a reminder, it's not just aperitif or a celebration wine. It pairs well with anything. Champagne tends to go well with anything like salty or fried, maybe some fish, that kind of stuff. But really, it goes with almost everything. So enough talking. Let's just try it. Give it a shot.
Sounds good.
Oh, my gosh. I just love the way Champagne. I could smell Champagne for hours.
It smells great, doesn't it?
This almost got like a nutty, almost kind of an almond or roasted almond kind of nose to it.
Mm.
Oh
It
yeah,
really does. It really does have that, like that nutty little flavor.
yeah.
So yeah,
So man, that's good.
that is really good. Yeah,
So
really good. And I love
and
that
now
we
you
can.
see how it'll pair with a lot of different things. So
Yeah, I was gonna say we can have it for any meal, really. So why save it, right?
yeah,
So
definitely,
yeah.
definitely. So
Oh
you have
my,
any favorites? What's your favorite today, Amber?
this is a hard one, Dave, because I really did like number one. And then when I tried number two, I was like, oh, and then when I got to number three, but actually I think number three might win tonight.
Yeah,
So
that's an
yeah,
excellent choice.
yeah, I think number three. And that was the one that gave me the hardest time when I popped the cork and everything
Oh, of
and went
course.
all over. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, I think tonight that's my favorite. So
yeah,
surprisingly. So Dave, again, another amazing episode with lots of information for us. I mean, who knew? Who knew about so much of the information that you shared with us? And actually, I was taking some notes, so I'll just do a really quick recap. Obviously, there are a variety of corkscrews, and so we just got to find the one that works best for us. And that sparkling wine needs to be cold or else it explodes, otherwise known as explodey. So love that. And then also how to properly open the bottle of wine so that it doesn't explode, but also that it needs to have more of a hiss, or my favorite quote of the evening was a little fart in church. So that will live
right.
on, my friend. So, and just the intense process of being able to make sparkling wines. That was amazing. Just talking about from the bottles and the twisting of the bottles to the vats and
Hmm.
how that's produced. And then obviously about the fires and the climate and Mother Nature and how that really does have such an impact on the harvest and the production, and how we get that into the stores, and that every decision, like you talked about, really does. Um, they're interwoven and everything. So,
Yep.
and then also I love that only a few selected few can be called champagne, because if they're not in the region, they can't be called
Right.
champagne. So I love that. So good to know for sure. So um, so Dave, again, thanks again for so much information. And I just want to share real quickly before we go. I know Dave's got some information too, but remember our magnet. So sign up, register to receive this, and then you'll be in the drawing for the sweepstakes for the tote. Again, that goes until October 6th, and winners will be announced on October 7th.
Yep, that's fun, exciting, and I really hope that uh, you guys enter, because that again, that wine tote is really cool. I'm thinking about
We
ordering
all
one
want one,
on
right? We all
Amazon.
want
Yeah,
one.
next week. So because I do carry wine everywhere I go, not everywhere I go, but almost. So, but definitely. So next Tuesday, now you're planning next week's show because it's about dessert wine. So you're the dessert wine expert, right, Amber?
I love dessert wine. I like to drink it. I don't know that much about it, but I
Okay.
like to drink it.
All right. Well,
So
we'll put something together for next week then. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about what we've got going on. If you're a are curious about dessert wines, you definitely want to tune in and check that out. So next week, Tuesday, 5 o'clock,
right.
be here, and then also mark your calendar, because I think we've had a lot of fun. And I love talking to Amber, but I'm really excited that we get to spend some time in 2 weeks with Bart Hansen from Dane Cellars. He makes some fantastic wine, and he'll be bringing us his insights over his last 30 plus years in the wine industry. And we'll be talking about some of his wines and his thought processes behind them. And he's just a great guy. And so I'm looking forward to the chance to chat with him and let him share kind of he's way smarter about wine than I am. So we can get into him. And yes, we are doing a port, Steve, just to answer your question real quick. So, we'll be doing a tawny port actually next week. So it should be
Very
interesting.
nice. Very nice. Well, Dave, again, thank you so much for your wisdom and your knowledge and for sharing that with us, and looking forward to next week when it's sweet and dessert wines. But until then, I hope you have a great week, and well, cheers.
Cheers.